Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz Movies, and it's time, now that it's, June by the time this episode goes out, to do the top 10 movies of 2025. Yes, it's been a while. I always take time at the start of the year, and by the start of the year, I mean like the first 3 or 4 months, to try and catch up with movies that I think I should see before I do my top 10 of the year. And inevitably, things always get pushed and delayed. In fact, I never got around to this last year. I still need to do the 2024 top 10. So that's kind of next on the to-do list. But I did get to a point where I felt quite happy that I'd seen most of what I was going to see. Now, obviously, there's always a chance that in the future I'll find some gem from 2025 and my top 10 will change a little bit. In fact, some of the ones that I've done already would probably already change a little bit. Maybe I'll do some sort of amendum at some point. But today's simple, top 10 movies of 2025. At the end, I'll compare it using my scoring system to the other years that I've done top 10s for, and it's that simple. So let's not waste any time, we'll just get into it. My top 10 movies of 2025. Number 10 is Sinners. Now, this is the vampire movie from Ryan Coogler. Michael B. Jordan starring in two roles, playing twin brothers. This is compared to a lot of things. I've heard people compare it to From Dusk Till Dawn because it's kind of like, first half is less of a horror movie, more of character kind of, well, it's not a thriller in this case, but more of a drama with these characters setting up a new bar and club that they want to promote, and get all the locals involved. And then the vampires show up about halfway through. There's a lot of racial tension as well because it's mostly a black community and the vampires are white. So there's some subtext there to read into. There's things to talk about. One of the big themes of the movie that I don't think I knew going into it was just how much music was going to play a part of it. And not just music plays or has needle drops or has moments where the music stands out. No, like thematically, even the opening text of the movie is a narrator saying, hey, music's an important part of human history and it's been with us since like caveman times and yada yada. And it does a lot of stuff with that. So it's very good. It's a very good movie. Ryan Coogler is a very talented director. There's some scenes in this that really stick out as being very, very impressive and confident. I think the slow build to the vampire stuff happening is very good. I think maybe the most impressive thing, though, is actually just how strong the character drama is before that point. It says something that watching a horror movie, I wasn't sitting going, oh, when we get into the horror stuff. Like, I wasn't really feeling that. I was like, yeah, that'll come when it comes. I was kind of into the dynamics and the idea of these two brothers wanting to set up this new place, but also feeling confined by the system at play, and the human villains as well as the vampire villains. I think all that stuff is really good. Now, the only little ding that I'll say against it, because I like the very ending of the movie, like the final sort of like character point it ends on, I quite like. But I will say, if I was to give it a bit of a negative, it would be that the eventual third act showdown with the vampires is a little underwhelming and kind of rushed, which was a bit of a shame because the build-up and all of the early vampire stuff in the middle of the movie was very good. So I would dock it a little bit for that, and it's perhaps why it's not a bit even higher than it would be. But it's a very, very good movie. It was kind of a sign that, hey, horror movies are big, they can be successful, and this one has big names attached to it, so I had maybe more of an advantage. But as we're seeing right now, with Obsession making tons of money on a nothing budget, horror movies can be breakout successes, and Sinners was kind of a bigger tentpole in that form in 2025. Number 9 is Blue Moon, and this is a film directed by Richard Linklater, and it's Ethan Hawke playing a musical playwright, a stage theatre writer. So it's based on a real person and loosely on a true story, and it's effectively a bottle movie that's, and this is not surprising given that it's Linklater, but it's all just kind of the conversations he has with various people in a bar on this one night when his old partner has made a new stage production with someone else, and it's very successful. And it's effectively just a character study of this man who is got all of his own faults, he's got all of his own problems, he's got a bit of an ego, he's very pleasant to talk to, but he's very, there's a little bit of a pathetic side to him in a way that you really feel sorry for him. And I think this one caught me a little bit by surprise because I expected to like the movie well enough, and I expected it to be fairly well done because of the people involved. But maybe part of it is because while I do think Linklater and his pairing with Ethan Hawke has been successful in the past with the before movies, before Sunrise, Sunset, so on. I didn't like Boyhood very much. Boyhood was all gimmick, and if you take the gimmick out of Boyhood, which is they shot it over years with the same actor growing up, I don't think there's much in Boyhood that I really liked. I think this, though, was a great example of no, this is just a movie that, despite the fact all it is conversations, it's constantly revealing more of the character's flaws as he talks to these different people about his past, showboating and things like that, and his insecurities, his kind of lust over a younger woman who's going to be arriving later that night. So there's a lot of build up to Margaret Qualley finally showing up and how he feels about her and what that represents for him in terms of like his hope for something going for, like, there's a lot of character depth to it, and there's so much energy in it, and a lot of that is the performance from Ethan Hawke. Now, I will say one minor ding on it is that this man he's playing was a very short man, apparently, and they use a lot of trickery to make Ethan Hawke be smaller than he actually is and with everyone else, and sometimes it was a little distracting, where it's not so much that it looked fake per se, it just kind of felt like you're doing some Lord of the Rings trickery here to make him smaller, like he's a hobbit, but maybe not as extreme as that, but it felt kind of close to that at sometimes, where I'm like, this is what this is making me think of. And I almost wish they just didn't bother. Like, I get that the real man was shorter, but I think it would have been less distracting if he was just playing his natural height. With maybe some simple tricks to make him feel like he's a little bit shorter, but not like, all the proportions are shorter the way it actually feels sometimes on screen. I think just hunching over would have been enough for me and less distracting. But that's a very minor nitpick in the grand scheme of things, because I found myself getting really invested in the character throughout the movie and feeling sympathy and hoping that he wouldn't mess up other opportunities. And I think it says something that the other characters in the movie aren't like awful to him. It's very clear that all of the down luck that he's had is kind of based on his own problems and stuff that he's created. And even then, the people around him are still willing to work with him. They're still willing to give him chances, and they're still willing to try and mend bridges. And part of the tension, if you want to call it that, is if he's going to screw it up, will he take the olive branch that he's been offered, or will he mess it up because his ego's just too big? But he's always kind of sympathetic, I think. I don't think he ever comes across as a bad person, just a very, very flawed person. So, really strong character study, all set in one location. I was surprised by how much I liked it, honestly, but that is Blue Moon. Number 8 is Marty Supreme. So this is one of the Safdies, not both of them, but Timothée Chalamet plays Marty. His name is not Marty Supreme, it's Marty something else. I can't remember what his actual name was in the movie, but he is into the table tennis, the ping pong, and he is determined to be a champion, and it's all about his drive. Now, the Safdies prior to this, of course, made Uncut Gems, and you can definitely tell this comes from someone who was involved in making Uncut Gems. It's a very similar type of character, and I think some people might even just call it an Uncut Gems like, and by that, I think what people typically mean is someone who is spinning a lot of plates, even though they can make their life easier by not doing that. But he's so determined to be a champion and screw people over to be a champion and get back into a table tennis tournament that it's him trying to con people into him getting where he wants to be. So this is not a particularly sympathetic character. In fact, he's a very self-absorbed character, and you kind of maybe enjoy when he gets his comeuppance a little bit. But there's a lot of natural tension in him trying to pull these things off, and he's very compelling to watch. And there's an art form to that. There's an art form to making it compelling to watch an asshole trying to win by doing asshole things. That's very easy to make that unpleasant to watch. But if it's compelling, and I think it is here, and you can kind of analyze how everyone around him kind of realizes how he is, or maybe is almost enamored with him because he is such a strong personality, and that's why he gets away with a lot of things. But strong character study for sure. I don't know if I liked it quite as much as Uncut Gems, but it's definitely very, very tight and very, very strong in its tension throughout, and the various side characters that weave in and out of his story. There's other people in there that you're going to recognize, Gwyneth Paltrow being kind of the main one that pops to mind. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just very, very tense and nail biting. And when we did this on Collector's Cut, there was a lot to talk about. There was a lot to discuss about the character and how they pulled this off. So I think it's very compelling and very edge of your seat, despite the fact that it's not actually that action-packed. Although there is some gangsters at one point, so there is a little bit of danger and like gunshots and things like that. But I wouldn't say it veers into actual thriller or action by any stretch. It's still very much a intense drama, as weird as a distinction as that may be. But that is Marty Supreme. Number 7 is Weapons. So we're back to the horror genre, which obviously is near and dear to my heart. And this is the Zach Cregger movie, which was very mysterious when it was coming out. A lot of the buzz didn't really tell you what it was about. And then eventually it was kind of revealed that, oh, this is about a group of school children who all go missing. Not when they're at school, they just all happen to be in the same class at school, but they all disappear at like 2 a.m. one night. There's a very specific time. I don't remember the exact minute, but they all disappear one night. They all just run out their homes into the darkness, and the movie's like, okay, what happened? You know, a lot of the parents want to blame the teacher because it's weird that it all happened to the kids in this class. And it's actually a very chaptered story, a lot like Cregger's previous film, Barbarian, where it kind of takes like, 20 to 30 minute chunks and says, okay, this is this character's chapter of the story. So sometimes we get different sides of the same moments. From a different character's perspective, we get to sympathize with different characters who are involved. I think this one for me actually is a little bit better than Barbarian, because I think that the ending worked better for me here, ultimately. I like what this ultimately became. It would be a spoiler to say what subgenre it falls into, because it does kind of hold that back, and it's a big reveal as the movie's going on later on in the story. But it has great horror sequences, like dark doorways where you can't see someone coming, or characters creeping around when someone else is sleeping, or just kind of like absurd moments in imagery that really is memorable and sticks out. And it's not afraid to be a little funny in places. There's a few moments in the middle, but certainly a few towards the end that are funny. And I know this kind of rubs some people the wrong way, but Cregger does seem to like, hey, I've made things very intense for a lot of this movie. I'm going to give you some relief and let you laugh at the end. And I know that some people would rather the tone be more consistent. I kind of appreciated it here because of the kind of comeuppance element of it that was in this movie. So I think he's a very strong director. That's the big thing that both Weapons and Barbarian have got, and why I'm looking forward to his Resident Evil movie is that regardless of the story and what you think of it, I think every scene is amazingly directed. His sense of pacing, his sense of timing for characters moving around, or the creepy thing happening when the noise comes in, how things are framed, or how someone moves in the background, it's always good, and it was great in both this and his previous film. So no, Weapons is great. I think it's a little bit pulpy by the end, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think that's part of the fun, and there's some very memorable moments of violence as well, just if you're looking for that in your horror movie. So that is Weapons. Number 6 is The Long Walk. So this is based on a Stephen King story. Although this may be one of the ones that he did under the pseudonym, the same one that he did Running Man under. But this is a high concept, kind of dystopian kind of future, maybe retro future type story, where every year, kind of Hunger Games style, a bunch of men who are, I think, 21 or 20, around that age, apply to be in the Long Walk. And it's basically this competition where people have to keep walking for miles and miles and miles until there's only one person left. So until you collapse or can't continue for some reason. But it's a movie, and we're in a dystopia, so much like a Squid Games or a Hunger Games or something like that, when you get eliminated, a soldier who's one of the referees effectively will kill you. And that's the stakes, that's the tension. So it's a do or die. And there's a lot of social commentary in here about how everyone feels that they have to apply for this, even though it's kind of horrific. And it's like, no one doesn't apply. Everyone always has to take the chance on this. And even though it's a lottery where one person per state gets into the competition, so there's 52 people playing, there's a lot of social commentary about, like, oh, this is entertainment to distract the poors from what all the rich and powerful governments are doing and that kind of thing. But the thing that I really liked about it, outside of that, was really just the characters, the sense of friendship and camaraderie from the main two, to an extent the main 4 or 5, but like the main two, their friendship throughout this film, and knowing that eventually, if it comes down to it, it's going to be one versus the other. And do we help each other despite the fact that we're all struggling? Again, more social commentary there, but I think that stuff is really good, and it's got a really nice sense of time passing where things are getting tenser and more difficult as the days go on. Feet are getting sore, people are struggling. It's got moments of humor and it's got moments of other things, but just that constant sense of tension mixed with like weird optimism because these people are just good people is really encouraging, and maybe even is kind of a dose of happiness, even though it obviously inevitably is going to get sad or depressing when people have to like drop out of the race. There's definitely a hopeful side to this, which feels really nice. And it feels really nice, especially in 2025, 2026. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, the only ding is that the very, very ending of it, like the last like 2 minutes, I think is just okay. Like, it's like, okay, how are you going to end it? I guess, yeah, this'll do. This'll work. But that's not like a major problem, though, because so much of what made the movie good was the journey. It was that long walk. It was the trials and tribulations, people getting scared and showing their worst side, their best side, and just kind of that friendship at the core of it was just so endearing and so hopeful in the face of certain failure, right? Ultimately, only one person can survive, so there's going to be a failure here. These friendships cannot last. But ultimately, we're going to be friends anyway, and we're going to help anyway, because we should help each other. And like the overall message of that is just, it's touching and it works. And I thought it looked good from the trailer, but I think it surpassed my expectations. It was really good stuff. So that is The Long Walk. Number 5 is a surprise for me this past year, and that was The Ugly Stepsister, coming from Norway, which is a slightly horror-skewed version of Cinderella from the perspective of the Ugly Stepsister, and this idea of everything she does to try and make herself eligible for the prince to pick at the ball, or whatever the event is. And it's basically like a body horror movie of her doing things to herself to make her skinnier, to make her more attractive. Her stepmother, or sorry, her mother, because it's Cinderella's stepmother. Her mother, and all the things she's like, oh no, you have to go and get these procedures done to make yourself better because you're too ugly, you're too this, you're too that. And it's a horror movie about the pressures on a young woman to appear a certain way, or you're not good enough. And then the other side of it, which is very interesting actually, is how Cinderella is treated by the stepmother and the others, is because they kind of think she is like a slut because she dares have a boyfriend, and they look down on her. And you kind of sympathize with the Cinderella figure in this in a very different way than I think you normally do, which is usually just the cartoony, they're evil, she's nice. Like, she's a little bit iffy at the start of the story, actually, because, hey, my dad's marrying, like, this whole new family. I've got this new sister that I need to put up with now. Like, she's a little bit standoffish at the start, but she's a lot more human as the story goes on, and you realize all these pressures and how awful it feels and so on. But honestly, the big thing here, aside from just the good social commentary and, like, the kind of the satire of like, beauty standards, if you will, is just the style here. The music in this movie was fantastic. It was shot in 1:6:61, so it's got kind of a unique frame versus most movies that are coming out. All the period piece clothing and like the locations all look great. Honestly, I thought it looked stunning. And yeah, the music's all this like synthy music, so it's a nice counter to what all the visuals are, which I thought really gave it a lot of life. I was engrossed throughout, and it's got a couple of really memorable, disgusting scenes, which people are going to think about, and just this like desperation and drive to like, oh, you're only worth something if the important man wants you, and you're going to have to mutilate yourself in order to get that. And it goes to some extreme heights by the end, and just all the things that the idea that the mother, the Cinderella's stepmother, like she's become kind of the warning of what happens if you don't succeed at this, and just how like vile she is as a person as a result of it. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but there's like a nice like message by the end that maybe some lessons have been learned. So I won't get into it too much, obviously, but no, Ugly Stepsister's great. Like I would probably say it's the best horror movie of 2025. Nice surprise. A lot of competition as well, right? If you're counting Long Walk, which is a little bit on the periphery horror, I've had like 4 horror movies so far, and they're all relatively close in quality, and it's just sort of things that I preferred or didn't prefer that kind of got this one up top at the end. But it was the most surprising of the bunch as well, which is always nice. So, cool. Number 4 is No Other Choice, directed by Chan-wook Park, who I'm a big fan of. I've been watching his movies for a good 20 years now at this point. And his latest is very much one of his movies. It is a thriller that is darkly funny in places and presents some interesting characters. So this movie is about a man who is laid off from his job. He works at a paper company. And it's all about how he's determined to not give up his morals and all the rest of it to get a new job. However, things get desperate. It's basically, the entire movie is a critique of capitalism, right? It's all about how awful the system is. And it's basically about him starting to look for a job, and he realizes that there's like 4 or 5 people who have also been laid off who are better candidates for the same sort of work that he'll be looking for. So he starts planning to murder all of the other people who would apply for the same job as him, so that he's the best one in the pile when it comes to the job interviews and the people who are doing the hiring. And that's what the movie's about. It's him kind of staking out his potential victims, and he's not like a trained serial killer. He's not very good at it. There is a little bit of comedy that comes with that. But it also then, as the movie goes on, focuses on his wife and his kids as they are feeling the effects of him not having a job, and his like sense of shame that he has, and how that it ripples to them, and how it's actually kind of his attitude that causes more problems than the fact that he doesn't have a job. So it kind of focuses and kind of, it studies the idea of like how this affects the family life, but not from a money perspective, but from just how it ripples and the toxicity that comes from that. All that stuff is really good. I kind of, one of my favorite things about the movie actually is how the wife feels like a secondary character for like half the movie. And then the back half, it kind of feels like she gets a lot more focus. Not so much that she becomes a lead character on equal sides to him, but more just that she gets enough in the second half that it feels like it's got a lot more interesting things to say about how it's affected her and how his attitudes affected her. And the title of the movie, No Other Choice, really comes down to this idea of people being put in corners. And we see a version from the wife actually where she feels she has no other choice but to do this extreme thing, in the same way that her husband, the main character, feels like he has no other choice but to do this extreme thing. And the phrase "no other choice" is said by like maybe 8 characters throughout the movie, of like, oh, we've got no other choice, this is the way the system is. Like, there's a lot to dive into in terms of what it's saying about capitalism and the human cost of it. And I think the ending's perfect. Like, the ending, like there's a really predictable, obvious ending or two they could have went with, and they went with something that was a little less predictable, although not shocking by any means. But it had so much more to say with the ending because of what it chose to do at the end. So, No Other Choice, unsurprisingly, fantastic. Highly recommend it. One of the best movies of the year. Number 3 is It Was Just an Accident. So this is a movie that I'd heard good things about, and it comes from an Iranian filmmaker, although it was made in secret because they aren't too fond of this guy's movies in Iran. And it's basically this story. It reminds me a lot of like something like The Marathon Man or other stories where like someone from like a camp, and then that, in the case of Marathon Man, it's people from a concentration camp recognizing the evil Nazi who was brutal to them. It's kind of that sort of thing here. And I don't really have as much context for the history here of what's going on, but the main character of the story recognizes who he thinks was this brutal prison guard when he was in prison wrongfully, along with a bunch of others for, speaking against the state, for protesting and whatever else. And he kidnaps him. And he needs to go around other people who were at the camp and have got their lives back and try and sort of like confirm that it is him. Like, are we sure this is him? And it's basically a bunch of people who have had these traumatic experiences, sort of like talking about what they should do with them, whether or not it is him. And it's a lot of driving around actually, and a lot of these like weird kind of intense debates. It's very good though. It's got a lot of meat on the bone because it's so much about kind of like these people who are relatively good people kind of jumping to this extreme, and then the debate of like, should we do something to him? Should we kill him? Should we get revenge for everything he did? And it does leave the question open for a lot of the movie: is it him or isn't it? And I won't spoil if it is or not, because I think that's obviously a big part of it. And kind of the humanity of it, and the kind of the the commentary on any kind of regime that does this to people. And it's full of that stuff, and the debates between the characters feel very heavy, and they feel like, and it's not like super serious the entire time, but I do like how the different characters who get involved, who are at this camp, like, one is very angry and he wants revenge. One is a lot more reserved and sort of like wants to discuss it. There's definitely different viewpoints that all come up as we see these different characters get involved, and we end up with all of them debating what they should even do. And this is another one, actually, much like my last pick, where the ending's pretty perfect. The ending is very good for a number of reasons. It's good for the end of the arcs for the main characters, but it's also good, that final sequence, and people who have seen it will know exactly what I'm talking about, is just this perfect, like, I can't say anything because it would just spoil it, but there's just a sound cue at the very, very end that is so effective and well done, and leaves it on this very, very kind of, like, I would say ambiguous place, but certainly a place that will leave you thinking and wondering forever. Is so effective. So yeah, it was just an accident. It's a great movie. I'd heard a lot of buzz for it, and it kind of lived up to that excitement, and it felt unique. It felt different from other stories I'd seen, even of a similar topic. So excellent stuff. Number 2 is One Battle After Another, which is interesting for me, actually, because I've actually not seen that many Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I always like to joke that his name's too close to Paul W.S. Anderson, and I hate his movies, so I just stay away from his by default. The couple that I have seen, I saw There Will Be Blood back when it came out, and I remembered thinking it was good, but I don't really remember much about it, so I can't really say anything with confidence there. And I did watch Magnolia once on TV, and I remember thinking that was really long and slow. So that didn't leave me with a great impression. So I'd kind of just not seen a lot of his movies, even though they're always praised, and I didn't really have a reason to avoid them per se. But this one was getting a lot of buzz. It was clearly a big movie of 2025. I wanted to check it out, and it's really good. I've got it at number 2. I clearly thought it was very good. I think the big thing for me with this movie is that it is a bit long, and the opening half hour is effectively the prologue to what the real movie is, right? There's like a half hour prologue that's doing backstory, and then there's a 2-hour real movie. That 2-hour real movie is fantastic. It's not that first half hour is not good, but you could definitely feel that it's all set up. I love that it's kind of like, it's got the high stakes tension and the chasing. You've got Sean Penn playing a villain. You've got DiCaprio, who's playing kind of the dad who was part of this freedom fighting group, and he's struggling to connect with his teenage daughter. What I loved about this one is how well some of the tense sequences are filmed when all the shit starts going down and he's on the run from people in the sort of the middle of the movie. But honestly, the big thing for me was how this became the daughter's movie throughout, right? It shifted to being about her, and so much of the movie was about this idea of generational kind of like guilt and just the sort of the burden that's been passed down through generations. Like all the things that her parents did have kind of led to some stuff here, and how she's the one that now has to deal with it, but now she has her own ideas about how to fight certain injustices. She has her own ideas about how to do certain things. And it's very critical of some of the characters from the past who, said they believed in certain things, but maybe were doing it for other reasons or because they were thrill seekers or whatever. But I love that it became her movie. And in fact, the last hour of this movie is almost entirely hers. It's her as a main character. She's the one taking on the bad guy and running from them and doing all this other stuff. All that stuff in the desert and the roads looks great. It's really well shot. And DiCaprio's still a factor, but he's not there to just be the savior. In fact, he's never that. He's kind of a loser in a lot of ways. It's more about his daughter at a certain point, and I really liked that transition, and it really made everything feel fresh to me. And it felt like, almost because thematically the movie's about one generation passing something down to the other, this trauma, this stuff. The idea that the movie itself passes its main character from Leonardo DiCaprio down to the daughter and says, no, this is her movie now, felt perfect for what the movie was saying and what it was doing. And it looks great. There's definitely some dark comedy kind of sprinkled throughout, and like awkward tension and awkward comedy. Sean Penn's just this like gruff, horrible human being, and it feels like the satirical elements are very on point, but ultimately it was kind of this coming of age story ultimately, and I don't think I expected that going into it, and I think that stuff was really well done. Like, it would have been probably solid without that, but like, for me, it was the thing that made it great. It was, the thing that made it, went from being good to being a great movie because it did that stuff. So one battle after another, fantastic. And number one is Superman. Now, I suspect some hoity-toity film people might roll their eyes at that and give me some shit in the comments. But it's my top 10 movies. It's what spoke to me more than anything. I'm not going to argue that Superman 2025 is a better made or more rich film than several of the choices that I've already said, but it's my favorite. It's my number one. It's the movie that I in many ways have been waiting for decades, basically my whole life. And what I mean by that is that, Superman 78 is a great movie. Superman 2 is pretty good. I have nostalgia for 3 and 4, but they're obviously not good movies. But every Superman movie that has came out in my lifetime, when I was, because I was born in 89, Superman 4 had already come out. Every Superman movie that came out in my lifetime has been varying degrees of bad to terrible. They are not good movies for one reason or another. Check out our review of Superman Returns for the colossal disappointment of that one. We didn't do Man of Steel recently for the new Superman movie, but my opinion on Snyder's Superman's been well documented up until this point. I had been waiting, even TV shows actually, right? Smallville I think is a lame-ass show. It's just CW show that happens to have some Superman stuff in it. It's not really a good Superman show. Superman and Lois is not bad, and I did like Lois and Clark in the 90s, right? I do have some fondness for that show, to be fair. But so much of the Superman movie and TV media in my life has been bad. And I was hopeful going into this that it was going to finally give me a Superman that I recognize, one that I'd been reading from the comics, one that, had the qualities of what Superman's going to have, and that sense of hope and optimism and idealism. And it does. And there's a scene in the middle of this Superman movie where Superman says, maybe kindness is the real punk rock. That the idea that in the real world, it's become not fashionable to just be kind and sincere. Being cynical and jaded is the default. Being dark and gritty is the default. And having a Superman movie kind of pointing that out and saying, no, I'm going to be good and kind anyway, because that's what I want to inspire, is just perfect. It's the nail on the head. It has something to say about the modern world and the modern world of politics. It's true to the character's lore. There's like one thing they changed, of course, which, I don't really have that much of a problem with it for a couple of reasons. If you check out the long Superman review we did on Collector's Cut, which was nearly 3 hours long, you'll hear me talk at length about all the things they did or didn't do and whatnot. But it felt like a movie I'd been waiting for a long ass time, and it nailed so much of what it needed to in terms of the characterization of Superman, a lot of his supporting cast, of why Lex Luthor hates him, which is something that I don't feel like I've seen in a movie before, is actually the what feels like the real reasons why Lex Luthor hates Superman. Gene Hackman was fun, he was charismatic of all hell, but he's not really what I think of when I think of Lex Luthor. So all of that stuff is great. The using the classic music mixed in with some new stuff, the optimism of it, like, who knows where we're going with the universe, and who knows if it'll keep up that feeling throughout, and especially with the whole Paramount merger and all that stuff that's going to maybe impact it. But I really couldn't have asked to feel better about Superman as an idea, and just how embracing of being a comic book movie it was. It was willing to have these big fights in the background and reference the fact that there's aliens and all these other things. It felt so alive and just proud to be a comic book movie, and in a way that, yeah, obviously the MCU is this big thing, but the MCU does constantly kind of tone things down to be more palpable and be a bit more bland. I felt like the Superman movie didn't tone anything down. It's like, no, Metamorpho's a weird character. He can change into a big hammer and hit a tank, and look at how weird that looks. It's great. This was a very personal number one, but it's one that kind of just landed in a way that it just made sense to me. So, yeah, I saw it multiple times in theaters, which is not something I do very often. these days. Now, part of that was circumstance because I got sick after I saw it and had to go see it again for the review. But still, I wanted to see it again. I was happy to go see it again. Most movies I don't want to see again 2 weeks later. That sounds awful to me most of the time. Even if I liked the movie, like I'd have to love a movie to want to see it a second time that quickly. But yeah, Superman. As a DC fan, as a Superman fan, I was, kind of in love with it. There's a few little nitpicks, a couple of little jokes that go too far or whatever, but it's very minor stuff. I'm excited for Supergirl. I'm excited for the sequel. No, I mean, again, very personal number one pick for me here, where my heart is speaking over my film critic brain a little bit here, but that's okay. I think all good top 10 should be a mix of those things. It should not be just a dry critic top 10. It should not just be weird, like, oh, I like this because I like this character, so therefore their movie's always going to get to like number 1 or 2 or whatever. That sounds bad to me as well. Healthy mix of passion, love, and actual, critic brain. So Superman is my number 1, and I am pleased to say it. I am pleased to make that assertion at this point. So now the other thing I do at the end of these top 10s, of course, is I give it a score based on my ratings for the movies. So if you look at the ratings, which I'm sure I've brought up on screen right now, I've got a few 8 out of 10s. The bottom 3 are 8 out of 10. I've got some 8.5s, and then the top 4 movies are all 9 out of 10. Now, the way I score this is that I take the average, but I also add on a bonus point for any 9s or 9.5s, and 3 bonus points for any 10s. No 10s this year, so it won't be getting super, super high numbers in that sense, but a very solid top 10 all the same. And when I do all that, I get a score of 12.6, which out of the now 5 years that I have done places it at number 4 out of the batch, below 2023 but above 1999, which is interesting. I actually think that 2023 might even be a little higher scored now, because since I did that top 10, I think I've seen Perfect Days. I think that was after I did that top 10, and I really liked that movie. So I think 2023 might even go up a little bit, bizarrely. But maybe I'll do some amendum scores at some point once there's enough of them to go back and check. But yeah, it's 4 out of the 5 that I've done, which doesn't sound amazing, but none of these years are bad. 1999's at the bottom of these 5, and that's got the goddamn Matrix and Truman Show and Iron Giant, which I love. So none of these are bad years, right? None of them are bad years. Yeah, 2025 coming in at just under 2023 currently. So yeah, the plan is to do 2024 soon. There's 1 or 2 movies that I kept meaning to see and never get around to, which is why I ended up pushing the top 10 back and back to the point where it just was like, oh, it's too late to do a top 10 now. But it's never too late to do a top 10. It's never too late to do that. So I've got 1 or 2 movies that I definitely want to still see from 2024 before I actually finally do that top 10. That should hopefully be soonish, but it's on the to-do list. I also do want to get around to 2003 at some point, because that was also a plan. But hey, the good thing about top 10s is they're never out of fashion, they're never out of style, so I get to come back and do them at some point. The weird thing is, and this is laughable given that, the doing the years has taken this long for some of them, is that I do like the idea of also doing this for either directors or actors and seeing how they score and have like a ranking of like different actors and their whatnot, but we'll get to that at some point. But yeah, 2025 was a good year for movies. I actually think it was a very good year for movies. It might not have had like the most 10s or whatever, or any 9.5s, but healthy 9s and 8.5s across the board is very, very good. And it was a good year for horror. That was the big downer for 2023, actually. Was the horror side of things was very, very weak, which definitely stuck out. But 2024 and 2025 were much better in that respect. So we'll see where that one lands when I do it. But yeah, there you go. That is finally my top 10 at 2025. Obviously, I saw a lot of movies from 2025, a lot of other good movies that did not make that top 10 list. But hey, it's only a good top 10 if you have to cut things that you really like. And I did have to cut some stuff that was great. So yeah, let me know what you thought of my top 10 in the comments below. Give me your top 10 movies of 2025. And thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. You can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the videos coming. Check out all the movie podcasts and all these reviews. Most of the stuff that I talked about today, we did review on an episode of something. The only ones we've not reviewed on a podcast episode where it was just an accident and Blue Moon. Those are the only two. The other 8 all got full podcast reviews, which are like a good 90 minutes plus in length, so you can get in-depth conversation on most of them. But that is me, so thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.